folks who cannot join us.
Thank you for inviting me on this webinar. This is my first experience using a webinar and to receive an interview.
Oh, it's exciting. You have so much to share and you're so well known. So it's 9 o'clock, Professor Wang Qiang. So it is time for us to start. I do want to thank you first for joining us. And I want to thank you, all of our participants who are here today. I see so many people whose names I know and who are well known in the profession, as well as those who are just joining us to kind of learn a little bit more about this unique form of professional development in China. So allow me first, Professor Wang Qiang, before we start, to kind of introduce you to our audience. And of course, the reason that you are here is because you're such a well-known entity in China in terms of English language education. Every time I look it up, I look at English language teacher education in China, your name always pops up. And so I thank you for the privilege that you've given us to join us today. And I think your research is in English curriculum, primary English teacher, English education, reading literacy in English, teacher education and development. And you've been head of the National Association for Language Teacher Education and Development in China. So you've had impact there at a large level, as well as publishing extensive works on English reading and composition and assessment. So I thank you again for being here. What you're going to share with us today is this unique form of teacher professional development and teacher education. I don't think we see too much of on this side of the world, actually, and it's on teacher professional development. So I will start and go ahead with our engagement, with our questions. And we'd like to know what this is. What are Chinese public lessons? What are Chinese teaching competitions as a form of professional development? Professor Wang Qiang?
Okay, thank you, Farida, for your nice introduction. And thank you for all the participants. Regarding public lessons in China, actually they are very common teacher training activities organized. Everybody are very familiar, probably as you said, that these are not really very familiar with teachers from other parts of the world. So let me just say a few words to introduce this type of activity for teacher training. Let me just show you a few photos while I'm introducing about this particular kind of teacher training event, very typical for the Chinese context.
Yeah, those pictures will be incredible.
Yeah, let's see. Yeah, I'll share some pictures so you can see how it looks like. A picture is better than words in terms of explaining things. I think they are very straightforward to tell you how it is done and in what kind of form. Let me show you some pictures here. What do public lessons look like in China? So this is one of the venue. It's a kind of sports center where students are having lessons on the stage with teachers observing and watching. These are mainly national level kind of competition or demonstration lessons. So another form, another picture you can see on the stadium, on the around the whole stadium, there will be audiences. The maximum number sometimes of participants reaches to about 5,000 teachers in one venue.
Right. And yeah, the unique thing about this is that the students are not, the teachers are teaching not their own students.
No, they're borrowing classes because they are local students. So teachers actually travel to the venue where the event is organized or was organized. Then they borrow students from a particular school, various grades in depending on what level of the text that the teacher will be using. So this is another event,
right?
National level. for primary.
Right.
There will be primary, secondary school students at
Right.
all grade levels. And these are after the public lesson that these experts and teachers who have given the lesson would be invited to the stage to share and comment and reflect on the teaching.
So if I could step back for those new to this, what you have is the teachers are teaching, and then at the stadium and at the back they're judges, right? And they're colleagues as well.
Traditionally, there are judges. Nowadays, there are national level, provincial level, mainly will be judges because it's by nature, it's a kind of competition. But in other occasions, when they are used purely for discussions, there won't be any judges, but there will be experts like this invited to the stage, and they share their comments and reflections on what they think about the lesson, how things, where the lesson was done very well and where the lesson could be improved.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
depending on the different kinds of events organized.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So some public lessons can happen in a school. So teachers in the district, in the area are invited. So if they have time, and they would come, observe, and learn from those teachers.
So if you stay with this picture, one of the things that I do want to point out, because I'm, as an outsider, I think for me, this was where the unique thing is. Teachers teaching at the front with the students, and at the back is the phalanx of judges or observers at the back. And I think this is so unique because the classroom is so open to anybody, not just anybody, but for people to come in and observe. And so I think that's pretty interesting, because as a teacher in an American context, I'm not used to having so many people in my classroom watching me teach. So this is unique.
Yeah, yes, and the teachers sitting at the back, and students usually sitting in the front. So teachers will be teaching students in the front part of the room, and usually recorded. These lessons are all recorded. And teachers observing the lesson, then after the lesson, they're going to discuss about the lesson together. Mm-hmm. And usually experts are invited to give comments at the end.
Okay.
Yeah. So here will be conferencing after the observation. So the kind of experts and invited people from outside the school will meet with the school teachers or invited observers, and they are going to discuss and see how they could improve the lesson. Mm-hmm. Usually this will be done in the trial lessons, so that another lesson will be done following the trial lesson, so to demonstrate improvements. Yes.
Yes, and I think that's also unique, because before the competitions, the teachers practice teaching many times, right? And then with their colleagues. And so, yeah, that's pretty unique as well.
Okay, so these are the photos that I have just to show how it works.
Fantastic. Pictures are more are worth more than 1,000 words. So, you know, you've given us a very good overview. So in a sense, you know, I think what is the rationale behind these lessons and you know, the competitions and what you see as the benefits?
Well, talking about public lessons, I have to explain that it has a long history in China. I have looked through some literature, and it was said that it started about the early 20th century. It existed since then, but I think it became more frequently used after the founding of the People's Republic of China in 1949, where public lessons has been used, particularly for teacher training purposes. As we all know that there are 10 years Cultural Revolution, that education and teaching was suspended, and then public lessons gained its popularity at the end of 1970s until now. And there could be a division of public lessons in two parts. The first part is from the 1970s, late 1970s to the end of the century, about 20 some years. during those time, public lessons are not really competitive. There was no competitions, but they are mainly used for local teacher training purposes. I remember when I became a secondary school teacher in the late 1970s, I participated actually. I was a novice young teacher, English teacher, and I was invited to a big auditorium to observe very very expert teacher who actually gave a demonstration lesson to see how she could motivate children to participate in speaking. That was in the late 1970s. I remember very, very well. And then after the 2001, that was the 8th national curriculum reform across the country in basic education. Then public lessons gained its prestigious status for competition, for award winning, and for training teachers.
Right.
I think
Sorry to interrupt, but I just want to, I think this is such interesting history that you're providing us. You know, I want to get back to how come it became a competition, because clearly there are benefits to this in terms of the Chinese perspective. But before we do that, I also want to share with the audience that in about 20 minutes, we'll open this to back and forth question and answer session. But for now, we're just sort of getting the basic foundation. And so I didn't mention that earlier, but I wanted to mention that to the audience at this point in time. So Professor Wang Qiang, my apologies again. So in a sense, since 2001, it has become quite competitive. So what are the virtues they see in this form of professional development?
Because of the curriculum reform started in 2001, that was considered the most radical and widespread curriculum reform since the founding of the country. So previous curriculum change or reform has been revisions, but the 2001 curriculum reform was a large scale, big change in terms of beliefs and philosophy in teaching. They try to change the transmission form of knowledge, this kind mode of teaching, to more learner-centered teaching. And as far as English is concerned, it promoted task-based language teaching, communicative language teaching, and encouraging learning through cooperation, learning through interaction, and learning through inquiry-based learning, which are were very, very unfamiliar compared to the traditional way of teaching. So teachers were faced with huge challenges. They don't know how to do that. Even though through my research, that in 2005, I think I did a kind of a survey research. I found that teachers were nearly 90% of the teachers were generally supportive. They think it was good ideas, but they were very worried and they had very mixed feelings because they simply couldn't manage the classroom teaching. So that's why public lessons became very useful, and has its advantages to show, to demonstrate what is good teaching and how these curriculum ideas seems very abstract, very far away from the teachers, could be applied and used in the classroom. And so that's why public lessons became very popular. However, at that time, you have to encourage teachers to do that, because the teachers face a lot of pressure, and they probably will lose face. They could fail because you never know what happens in the classroom. Everything was new. So in this case, young teachers were, more promoted to take up public lessons, not like before. They were more expert teachers already having reputations and things. But young teachers, because they're more open-minded, and they are more courageous in terms of innovating their teaching, so they like to try. So they need also to be encouraged or awarded for doing that. So in
Right.
this case,
Excuse me for interrupting again, because you've brought up a couple of things. One, the idea of young teachers. And I think
yeah,
what you consider young teachers are those under 40, right?
yeah,
So I think, yeah, I guess I don't fall into that category anymore. But the other is that, you know, these teachers, these young teachers, or those under 40, are asked to compete in these competitions, not just to showcase, but also for promotion, right?
yes,
Because the more they win these competitions, the more they are promoted toward permanent positions, wouldn't you
yes,
say?
yes, yes.
And so, and that's pretty tough. But I think one of the things that these public lessons do is that they take the advantage of the group work, the teacher groups, yeah, that you have in
Yeah,
China, which is
yeah.
what, the Jiao Yanzu, my tone is wrong.
教研员, yeah.
Yeah, and so, you know, I think if you could talk about that, because that's also very unique, because you can't go into the competitions just by yourself. You have a cadre of people supporting you. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think this is quite unique in the Chinese education system, that in China, we have 3 tiers of teacher supervision offices as institutional structures at provincial, municipal, district, or county levels. So the 3 tiers of this structured educational system there, where the teaching research, the specialists are staffed in these offices. Mm-hmm. And these people are taking care of or responsible, taking responsibility for teaching and for teacher training and for administering exams. Mm-hmm. So in this case, that when teachers are selected for doing public lessons, they start from the district level. So they do competition, they do teaching at this level, selected, and to see who is doing better, you know, and then recommended to the next level, municipal level, and then to compete with other teachers recommended from other districts, and then to select the final one to represent to recommend to the province. And provincially, they select the best one to represent the provincial teacher, the best teacher who will represent the province to give public lesson at the national level. Right. So when the national event is organized, we have about 30, maybe 30, basically 30 provinces in general will participating. So each province would have only one recommended teacher to do public lessons.
It's amazing.
Very competitive.
It's amazing the way the system works, because you know that's a pretty hard competition. And when one of the things that I saw was that each teacher was surrounded by her colleagues, and with a you know, supporting the teacher, developing materials together toward the competition, because they can be doing it for 8 times per semester. And so, so if you could talk about how that support comes, because this teacher, you know, in the competition gets a lot of support from the group. And it's a very unique form, I think, very unique Chinese teacher professional development to have that much mentorship. Yeah. Can I Farida, to share just one page to show this process? Okay. On the screen. Sure. So that you can see. Yeah. Very nice. So basically, I think it's easier to explain this process by looking at this little diagram. So a teacher or school is selected to do a public lesson to demonstrate new curriculum ideas. The whole purpose of doing it is not really for winning or for competition. The fundamental purpose is to promote new curriculum ideas. And then when a teacher or school is recommended, is selected, then a group of teachers from the same school or district works together to prepare the lesson, trying to reflect the new curriculum ideas, to see how to the largest extent, they hoping that the lesson will reflect new curriculum ideas. Then the selected teacher tries the lesson,
with some classes, you know, she borrows classes, travels to different schools because she has to try the lesson with different levels of students.
Mm-hmm.
So they find they go to different schools to try the lesson, and the whole group will go with the teacher to observe and to see how it works in that particular school and give comments and suggestions for improvements. And she receives feedback, and the whole group to revise the lesson together. Then, you know, traditionally, I think to ensure success, the teacher often pre-teaches some parts of the lesson. Traditionally, I mean, before, at the beginning of the new curriculum, during the first 5 to 8 years, you know. So the teacher would pre-teach the lesson with some students who she will be working with during the public lesson to ensure success, because the only way to do it is to succeed. That's the most important thing. So no chance to fail. So this kind of pressure is very strong. Yeah. I think for some young teachers, because it's a group work, some of the young teachers, they sometimes they do not actually understand the curriculum ideas very well. They are just performing ideas of other teachers who have given the recommendations. So, so if you, after the lesson, when they are asked questions, sometimes they find it very difficult to answer the questions. Mm-hmm. This are the cases before, you know, during the beginning years of the curriculum reform, and things are changing at the moment. And after the public lesson, the teacher will self-reflect, and then experts will be invited to give comments for the observing teachers. This is basically is a kind of a typical cycle of how public lessons is done. I hope that will explain something. But yes, this is you know, traditional kind of public lessons. Mm.
Yeah, it does actually. I mean, I'm just floored because I was invited to be a judge on one of those, in several of those competitions, and you know, the part, I think, besides just teaching to the public, the part that's difficult is the reflection at the end, because the teachers get asked about what they're teaching. So it's almost like a dissertation defense. You have to, you know, answer about, you know, about your teaching. So it was really interesting to see from an outsider's perspective. Now you've laid out a really good picture about what this traditional form of, not traditional, what the original or the fundamental form of teacher public lessons and teaching competitions as professional development. Now you have written several pieces because in terms of reframing what you just described, right? And so yes, if you could talk about what is it that you're doing to reframe the structure that exists currently, and why? What criticisms are you trying to address, and what changes are you hoping to achieve?
Okay, thank you. I think the fundamental purpose, as I stressed just now, is to promote curriculum ideas. However, because of the high competitiveness, which made public lessons became a staged performance, it actually couldn't accomplish the kind of function or purpose that we hoped for. As I was have been involved in curriculum development, so I've been writing curriculum for schools in the past 20 years, actually, since 2000. And then I realized that this wouldn't really help very much of teachers who are working in the classrooms, because we receive a lot of criticisms from the teachers. They say they are good ideas and they seem to be very successful, but they are only staged performance. They couldn't be applied in an ordinary classroom like routine lessons. And the teachers complain about this. They are too good to be true, because when you teach the students selected to cooperate with the teacher are usually very good students. So, but in real classrooms, there are a lot of individuality. There are different levels of students, and the real teaching wouldn't go as smooth as what they would see at public lessons. So they were not convinced about these public lessons. They thought they were made up or a kind of just for performance. So because of these criticisms, I thought that probably we need to really understand what these teachers need, how we could help them. Because if things do not happen in the ordinary classrooms, reform will not happen at all. Mm-hmm. So everything you write, you know, very good ideal wishes and hopes and, you know, very good ways of promoting student learning, they can't be actually realized or implemented. So in this case, I have been then thinking about how I could help teachers and to reframe public lesson, because you can't refuse it simply because they are so much welcomed by teachers. If you gave them a survey and asked them what they need for teacher training and public lessons, as it demonstrated in my survey study, and they said over 60% of the teachers say ranking the first is public lessons. They want to see public lessons. They needed it. How could we, you know, make it work and function as what we expect they do? So that was something that I was trying to do. Mm-hmm. So one thing, I think we need to change the competitive nature of public lessons. So public lessons is not for competition, not for award winning. It's not simply for performance. It is actually need to be down to the earth, to demonstrate to the teachers that it can work in an ordinary classroom. So one of the main criticisms that teachers say is because they used the kind of materials selected from, I don't know where, but nowhere. It's not something teachers will use in their classrooms. So they would say, you know, the materials are different and the students are different, and the context is different, support is different, so I couldn't do it. So in this case, I think what we do is we need to go into the classrooms to do more school-based public lessons, to work with the school teachers in the school, to use their own course books, to use their own students, real students, it's not borrowed, their own students, to see how these ideas can be put into practice. So we help teachers to solve their own classroom problems, teaching problems that they face on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. So we're not talking about an ideal context that whatever you do, you will succeed, you know. But in this case, teachers started to welcome this kind of teacher development activities, even though they still face some kind of challenges for undertaking, you know, such kind of lessons. So the things we do is use their own classroom. They choose the text that they want to do, and they are going to work with their own students. And then the teachers, expert teachers, textbook writers, curriculum developers, and teaching research specialists in that particular district are invited, and the school teachers form a team. So the whole team work together to discuss what kind of principles that we should follow and how we can put these principles into practice, combining these with the course books that the teacher will be using in with her own students. So these are the things that we do.
That you advocate in the reframing. But you know, yeah. And then I think one of the things that somebody might say, two things, if I may interject. One is that isn't this already existing in the Chinese system? You know, from what I could observe in the Chinese classrooms, that teachers teach and others come in and watch, you know, how that particular teacher is teaching their own students, and then they discuss there and outside the classroom. So that is one thing that I want to bring up. The other is that even despite the reframing, somebody would say this is still putting a huge pressure on teachers because their promotion depends on this. And so what would you say to those criticisms, if I may ask?
Okay, first of all, I think there are some kind of school-based teacher development activities. Not every school, but in some schools, they have a kind of a routine public lesson in the school. Mm-hmm. Each semester, they will appoint, particularly for young teachers, they would say, teachers under the age of 40 would be a line. So each teacher, every teacher under the age of 40 would need to do a public lesson. You can choose the semester that you would like to do it. And the difference is, even though they're using their course books, not outsiders invited. They're only within their school context, in the school with colleagues. And for some schools, there is no in-depth discussion afterwards because colleagues, sometimes have the problem of directly giving criticisms. So they probably will give more praise or saying some good things. It's very difficult, in fact, to criticize someone who have done a public lesson. So I think even those things are done, it's a way of promoting teachers to prepare the lesson, to think about the lesson more seriously before they do the public lesson. And it's a very good way. However, the effectiveness, it would be different from what I have discussed just now. Is the team or incorporates people coming from outside. And they are like, curriculum developers, textbook writers, and specialists from that area, and expert teachers from that area are invited together to discuss. And the kind of culture that we build in this kind of event is open-mindedness. So criticism is welcomed. Because if you want to improve without any criticism, how could you improve? There's no way you would know by yourself things that needs to be improved. And the main thing is the teacher would have no idea how. So the experts, the textbook writers, they are more experienced. So they know how these can be improved. So they would provide some ideas and discuss with the teacher so that the next time the teacher and the group of teachers in that school will work together to prepare the lesson for the second time. And then they invite these so-called outsiders to come in again and to discuss about the lesson. And finally, when the lesson they think would be good enough, then they would organize a district level teacher training event to do a public lesson. There is no competition. There's only a public lesson for discussions. So in this case,
this is your reframing. This is the reframing that you're suggesting, right? To that's different from the existing structure that we had that's now in Chinese public schools, which is competition based. So what you're saying that is more to be used as a collaborative way of professional development involving not just a teacher and her colleagues, but also other specialists like those who develop the books and curriculum developers. That's what you're suggesting. So if I may take this discussion to a different phase, it's about 9:33, and we're going into the question and answer session. Is that okay, Professor Wang? Unless you want to say one or two words before we do so.
I think it's okay for a question and answer session now.
Okay.
It's fine.
So I have two individuals, Yuran and Renee, who's going to help us bring forth some of the questions that are being asked. And so, so in terms of questions and answers, if you guys would like to pose some questions, that would be great. And the criteria, I think, is one of them that I think that was asked as to what is the criteria for judging effective teaching?
Well, the curriculum ideas would be the criteria. For example, if we promote nowadays in the curriculum promotes language learning with the development of the thinking skills. This is something that recently just promoted. However, in language classrooms, we found that rarely teachers would engage students in higher order thinking. But most of the activities done are lower level, lower order thinking, repeating, reciting, retelling, reconstructing, combining sentences, those kind of exercises focusing on language. Well, there is very little engagement with the student to thinking critically or interpreting things and relating to their personal lives. So those kind of activities. So then we would help teachers to design the lesson from the learning and understanding to internalizing the language and gradually to construct the kind of cognitive knowledge that they learn from the particular material. And then
the question is, when people
yeah.
are looking at these teachers teaching, what are they looking at? So your first point was that you are looking at whether or not they're drawing students' experiences into the teaching instead of just teaching grammar and transmission. So that's one criterion. What are other criteria that judges are looking for when they're trying to judge the effectiveness of teaching?
Whether there will be active participation from the students, whether there will be higher order thinking, higher order thinking involved, whether there will be students' value judgment, expressing their value judgment. So education is more of a developing students' character, and students' correct values. And then by learning that you would engage students to make their own judgment or decisions with reasons behind. So those kind of things that we will be looking for, really things that we look for will be combined with the particular theme or topic of the text material that is being used, depending on the particular text material. So they learn from that what kind of things, what knowledge they have learned, and how they see the author, the writers, from the writer's perspective, the attitudes, and how does the writer argue for a particular point, a particular idea, or particular point of view. So in this case, you engage students in higher order thinking. And in making judgments, yes.
Yeah, Professor Diane Larson-Freeman, whom you well-known scholar here and elsewhere, asked this question. I don't know whether you can see, but Professor Larson-Freeman is asking about what feedback, Professor Wang Qiang, are you getting from teachers on the reframing that you are undertaking, or whether it's too new a phenomenon for them to give you any feedback yet?
I think the major difference was originally the public lesson is a kind of a once for all activity. The teacher undertake the public lesson, and that's all for her. She gained, she's being awarded, and she wins the competition, and then she disappears in a sense. Well, for the reframed public lesson, because things are keep changing, the sustained development, I think, is far more important than once for all kind of learning. Even though the teacher learned through public lessons, in the past years, however, they probably stopped learning. At least we don't know whether they will be learning or not. Nowadays, with the reframed public lesson, and we found from my recent research, I had a kind of a sustainability research, asking teachers, after the kind of engagement with such kind of lesson, the kind of research lessons, they engage in this kind of activity. When it finished by half a year, 1 year, 2 years, even 3 years, even longer, I would go back to them to see whether things they learned then, sustained their development. And I found many teachers as long as they know there are activities going on, they would enthusiastically join in again, and actively participating and giving their ideas and comments. They became very, very enthusiastic, very confident after participating in this, because they know what they're doing. They have theorized from this kind of practice for themselves. So they have a lot of comments, and they are so eager to express their own views and ideas. And many of them, I think, have become very good teacher, kind of teacher trainers, because they are invited by many other schools or districts to tell them what has happened with what they learned, you know, through this kind of the research lessons that we now call it, that we study the lesson with the teacher. So the teacher would actually lead the whole instructional design and reflect and revise everything, but we all gave support instead of we gave ideas and you demonstrate and you perform. You know, it's changing the nature of this kind of form of teacher development. So the major difference I found was sustainability is very high for this type of research lessons. Yeah.
Right. That's fantastic. I mean, you're essentially developing professional learning communities with the teachers. And I think one of the things that I've heard teachers say is that we're always trying to meet external standards. Somebody is bringing their standards for us to meet. And what you're doing is this flipping the table and allowing the teachers, that at least the ones you work with, to kind of take charge of their own learning and what they want to showcase and what they want to learn to know more about. There's another question from Melody, and Melody's asking about these borrowed lessons. Going back to the competitions, are the teachers, she asks, allowed to pre-teach these students before the public lessons?
No. What we emphasize very much with the reframed lesson is real, authentic. Completely real, authentic. What we are looking for is to see how students, with knowing nothing about this topic or knowledge, and to see how the teacher guide and scaffold learning and makes learning happen. So another change, I think, in terms of teachers' attitudes, I think we're switching to looking into the students. So we are seeing how students were supported in the learning process, what they have learned after the lesson, and they should be able to demonstrate what they have learned. And normally at the beginning, we would invite teachers to activate what students knew already about the topic, about the language at the beginning. So you could see there was, scattered knowledge or fragmented language being used. They couldn't express themselves very friendly. Then they would bridge the gap of language and cognitively in terms of cognitive knowledge. Then they, through learning the text, by bridging these two, and then they internalize and they demonstrate, create situations where students can use the language to demonstrate what they have learned. So you could see a fuller picture of students' logical use, more fluent use of the language, and also more knowledge built around this particular theme or particular topic. Then they have their own critical views even at the end, personalizing themselves, giving their own comments. I think it's very precious when you see students who are coming in with their own ideas. It's not something being told by the teacher anymore, but just simply generated from the students. Some students were so moved, by a certain topic, they even have tears in their eyes. As observers, when we were observing these lessons, we became very, very moved because students were put into the situation and they were really thinking and saying what they want to say. So there are very moving moments of those kind of lessons, which, rarely happened before because they were, but just staged performance.
Right.
Students just pretend Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I guess it's here, the difference in the reframing is that it's a real context. It's an authentic context for the
Yeah,
students
yeah, yeah,
themselves.
yeah.
I think, I think you've stated that very well. I guess the question that Melody was asking for the competitions, that the original competitions, teachers
Oh,
could not pre-teach, right?
mm,
Their students,
mm,
they just go in cold and then teach, right?
mm, mm.
And then for the reframing, essentially it's the same thing, except that it's more of an authentic environment. Teachers can't teach the lesson to students beforehand. They have to come in, but it is their students. It is their own authentic classroom that they're trying to teach. And so,
Well, I think I need to explain there because public lessons were organized at different levels. The kind of public lessons that I just now introduced through my reframing model is based in a school
okay.
using real school students. But nowadays there are, again, still continuing with provincial competitions and the national competitions, but kind of we're trying to play down the competition part by what I think what they have done is to change this kind of the competition is you are given the prize before you actually demonstrate.
Oh,
Because you were already being recognized as a very good teacher, first prize winner. So you are given this kind of title before you demonstrate. So you don't have to worry whether the lesson will be a success or maybe a failure. So the teacher actually, before they come to give the demonstration lesson or in the competition, they are already selected and being given the award. Then they just demonstrated in a still borrowed class because they have to go to a particular location, a particular venue to borrow students from a particular school in the area, maybe 2 schools in the area. So they bring students into the venue to cooperate with the teacher in the lesson. They've never seen the teacher before. Probably before the lesson, they will see the teacher maybe for 10 minutes just to familiarize themselves, for the teacher to know the students a little bit more and for the student to know the teacher for a little more, just 10 minutes before the lesson usually. So there is no time for you to rehearse or, yeah.
this is the competition that you're talking about. This is the original competition, and you're trying to change that. You're reframing that. You're having teachers work with their own students instead of putting them in a new classroom with new students. They have no knowledge of what's going on with the students.
Yes.
So you're trying to change that. But I think one of the things that also has come up is the idea. I think Yuran had posted a question about, the idea of face, right? And so, and in terms of this reframing, what happens is that, I think we heard the expectation that before and after the teachers teach, there must be the changes must be seen in terms of students' knowledge or performance. Now the criticism would be is that there is still pressure. The teacher has to keep her face, because if there's no change that happens in the students, then she or he would lose face. And so how would you respond to this? Because teaching is, can we bring about change that quickly?
Yeah. So for the reframed public lesson or research lesson that we call it, the teacher who participates in this event would be voluntary. First of all, they have to be voluntary, completely voluntary. It's not something that they are appointed by someone or by the school leader. That's the first thing. Second thing is these teachers, they have very high motivation. They would like to learn something from, because it's a very rare occasion that they could be supported by so many people, textbook writers, curriculum developers. It's a very rare occasion for them. So once the school, collaborates with, my university, with us, we have a team of people at the university to help collaborate with a number of schools. So we go to these schools frequently planned so that we work with particular teachers. And these teachers, I think they're going through some kind of psychological torture because they have to face themselves, you know, with criticisms, which was at the beginning could be very difficult because some of the teachers already, they thought they were competent, they were good teachers, and then they suddenly were criticized, you know, we're not saving any face. We just say directly, you know, what happens with you? What's the problem with your lesson? And then they become astonished, shocked, you know, sometimes by the comments. And they then reflect, they would reflect on what has been commented. And through discussions, we gradually gave them, we gave them very detailed support with their instructional design comments on the, you know, if I have a chance, I could show, you know, how their instructional design were being commented with the changes, track changes thing. So we gave every little detail to see, sometimes gave a question, sometimes to invite them to think about some other alternatives, and very detailed support so that they rethink about how they have planned. And through WeChat, we discuss sometimes, you know, many times to revise, to improve. And these teachers then, the most important thing is the second time she goes to the classroom to teach, she found her students changed because they changed from passive to active, and she also interviewed the students, we interviewed the students. You could see the face of the students, the active participation from the students. They want to say things. And some teachers say this has never happened before. So which actually have taught them to rethink about their lessons. And originally they didn't think their student would be able to do it. And then after we encouraged them to do, mainly we asked them to give students a chance to let go. That's the main thing we tell them, to let go. Don't grab everything and do everything for your student. Just let go, let your student do it. And they were very afraid at the beginning, but gradually they became, you know, convinced, and then they let go. And once they let go, they see how classroom changed, you know, students changed, motivation changed, participation changed, and also students' language, you know, the kind of output changed. And these would be very, very educational for the teacher. And then they will continue changing, yes.
I think you've addressed one of our other participants' questions, Preng Dong, who's asked about, you know, what is the teacher group, the Jiao Yanzu, you know, what is the role of those teacher groups, the mentoring group that always surrounds a new teacher, which I think is another fabulous element of Chinese teacher instruction. And so I think you've addressed those questions. We may have to have another session on Jiao Yanzu, because
Yeah.
it's actually a huge area of teacher professional development. But before we have a few minutes left, one of the things is that how many areas have you been able to do this reframing? Because teaching competitions and public demonstrations is huge everywhere in China. You know, I think there are over 1 million English language teachers in China, and so where have you been able to do the reframing beyond Beijing Normal University, which is the premier teacher education university in China, your institution?
Well, we actually have a group of teachers. We work as a team, and then we work with different schools in different parts of China. We started in Beijing because locally, you know, very convenient. So we can go to schools and pay visits. And gradually, I think we've done it for the past, particularly intensive work with school-based kind of research lessons for the past 5 years. We've worked with about 70 schools and over 100 teachers. So, and each teacher behind would have a group of 教研组, with them. So we're not working with individual teachers. We're working with a teacher and a teacher with his 教研组 or her 教研组 together.
Right.
So we are growing our impacts with different schools. However, compared to the large number of schools and teacher population, what we could do still quite, minimal at the moment. However, I think what we have done is, as teacher trainers, we have gained a lot by doing it. Because at the beginning, we could talk about theories. We didn't know how, these things can be done with the teachers using their own course books. So by working with those teachers, we now know various course books, various kinds of texts, different kind of texts, listening, reading, speaking, writing, whatever text that the teacher would work with. We help them to develop kind of lessons that would reflect the new curriculum ideas, and we gained all these, and I think that enabled us to develop our teacher educator competence. I think that's also a very important gain. I think we're working with Hainan difference, which is very far from Beijing. Hainan is in a very southern part, coastal area. We're working with Shenzhen schools, working with Guangzhou schools, Shunde schools. We're working with Shandong schools, and a number of schools spreading up to other parts of the country. In the coronavirus, this kind of situation that we're using this platform, online platform, to discuss lessons and to do teacher training and connecting with many schools from different parts of China. I think that really helped many teachers.
Yeah. So that, you've mentioned really big provinces, big cities as well that you're working with. And so that's, that's a significant step, because I think competition, the challenge remains, teachers are promoted through these competitions. And so you really have a huge uphill battle to reframe this, because competitions remain the only ways teachers are promoted and acknowledged. And so we respect your efforts to bring about the changes, not because these are big changes that you're suggesting. So we have a few more seconds, actually. We have a minute left before we close this. Do you want to say any final last words or questions that I did not ask?
Oh, actually, we got a new question here from Guyan Kelly.
All right. Okay, the question is research. What is the research supporting people who are participating in the competitions? Are there any indications of current research on how teachers can access the resources and guidance to prepare for to reform the public lesson? So essentially, you mentioned big places. What about those teachers in the rural areas? Are you reaching to them as well in terms of guidance and resources in this reframing?
When we have I think when we have public lessons, teachers are invited, because depending on the scale of the lesson, why there are national competitions and provincial competitions are still going on. Well, I personally wouldn't actually participate, even though, sometimes I was invited to be judges or the commentators, but I wouldn't really go to these events anymore, since I didn't have time, to do this. I pay more attention to the kind of localized or reframed public lessons that I've been engaged in doing. Those lessons are still very popular, because it can reach many teachers. As I said, they could be participated by over 5,000 teachers in one go. It could run for 3 days from morning to night. Each day they observe 5 to 7 lessons the whole day with comments. Then 3 days with nearly 15 lessons altogether. I think in this, because public lessons, these kind of provincial or national ones were organized in different areas. So teachers, rural or urban teachers can all go to participate in those lessons. They will be supported by their school, you know, to travel to that particular place to participate in those kind of events. I think they are still useful in terms of providing more resources and for local teachers in that particular area, even though I wouldn't be going, you know, to these kind of things. They're organized by National Association of Teachers, you know. It's quite prestigious. In terms of prize winning or promotion, nowadays things have changed because those teachers who participated in our reframed public lessons, they got certificates. You know, they each time they do it, they're not giving any prize, but they gave they are given a certificate showing they have given a public lesson on a particular topic. That certifies them for being able to do it. And then this could also be used as a kind of evidence for their promotion. And the most important thing is these teachers, after doing this, they're going to write articles, papers to like narratives or like how they have improved in process to publish in journals. And those published papers became also very good support proof for their later promotion. I think these teachers are already becoming leading teachers in the area nowadays because of their publications and yes.
Thank you for the time that you have given us. One of the things I will say to audience members is that we will have this discussion recorded and we will put it up on the TEIS blog and other areas. And so we can continue this discussion and we will invite Professor Wang Qiang to share resources for us to kind of look for and reach out and connect with so that we can, you know, find those that are most helpful or ask more questions. And so Professor Wang Qiang, I thank you so much for being here, and we are grateful. It's late in the night for you, so we are especially grateful on this western part of the world. And thank you to all attendees from across the globe as well in coming to join us today. So much, we learned so much today. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Farida. And I would just want to say thank you for Lawson Freeman, because I don't know whether she knows me, but we met quite a few times. Yes. She's someone that we all, the work that we all read and study. So thank Lawson Freeman, Professor, to attend this webinar. And thank you, Farida, for inviting me to share about public lessons in China. Thank all the participants. Thank you very much.
So Professor Freeman said she knows you too. So you both can continue the conversation. Thank you again, everyone, and have a very good day and evening. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you.